Hello everyone and welcome to Learn TV channel for a new episode. I'm your host Angela and today we will connect with Jonathon Fielder, an expert trainer in the field of leadership management and emotional intelligence. Jonathon has been supporting clients from all over the world for many years now and has been teaching emotional intelligence within leadership context in more than 20 countries. Currently, he delivers leadership management and soft skill courses for L3RN PDI. Jonathon, welcome back to our show. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Thank you.
If someone aspires to get in a leadership role, there's an emotional element to be considered. It helps to successfully coach teams, manage stress, deliver feedback, and teamwork. What does emotional intelligence mean and why it matters?
Yeah, that's a really good place to start, primarily because emotional intelligence is so misunderstood by many people, especially men, unfortunately, which is a shame because we are generally the ones who need it the most. So it's probably quite helpful to begin with looking at what emotional intelligence isn't. For example, it's not about hugging trees. It's not about smelling flowers or crying at sad movies. It's not about skipping through life with a smile on your face, oblivious to the world's challenges. Emotional intelligence is really about how well we handle ourselves and our relationships. I think it was episode 4 that you had Nicole Smart on discussing emotional intelligence in the context of customer service. If you haven't seen that, it's really worth looking at that on YouTube and watching what she says about it, because she gives a really helpful insight into the applications of EI. But one of the definitions that she used, which is one I really agree with as well, is Daniel Goleman's definition. And he defines emotional intelligence as the capacity for recognizing our own feelings and those of others, for motivating ourselves, for managing emotions well in ourselves and in our relationships. Now, psychologists will tell us that there are two components, two facets, if you like, to communication, what we call intrapersonal and interpersonal. Now, interpersonal communication is communicating with others. It's about my choice of words, my tone, my body language, my eye contact, my assertiveness. Most of us are familiar with being assessed or appraised once or twice a year on our interpersonal communication skills. But intrapersonal communication is communicating with myself. And that, of course, begs the question, how do I communicate with myself? Do I talk to myself? Is that little voice in my head? Sigmund Freud said that's the first sign of madness. So intrapersonal communication is all about developing self-awareness. And self-awareness is seeing yourself as you actually are. Now, of course, that begs the question, how else can I be? I look in the mirror, I see me, I see a reflection of me. I see how I think I am. But psychologists will tell you that how you think you are and how you actually are often two very different things. There's often a very large gap between how I see myself and how others see me. So intrapersonal communication is about recognizing my strengths, but also my weaknesses and my development areas. It's about understanding how my beliefs impact my external behavior. It's about recognizing how my values impact how I live my life. It's about recognizing what motivates me, what drives me to be successful. And it's about knowing my hot buttons, recognizing behaviors and mannerisms in others which maybe just really annoy me or frustrate me. So emotional intelligence has both an intrapersonal and an interpersonal aspect. And this is important because it's the intrapersonal that really impacts the interpersonal. What happens in my mind, in terms of my thoughts, beliefs, values, feelings, affects how I communicate with others. So if I want to improve my interpersonal communication, the first place I should really look is my intrapersonal communication. So we can argue that emotional intelligence is really about understanding and learning to use my feelings and my emotions to create optimal results in my relationships, both with myself and with others.
Jonathon, how would you define leadership?
Yeah, Now, in the context of business, I would say that leadership is an influencing process. And of course, if we're influencing people, we have to ask, what are we influencing them towards? And in business, that's usually a vision. So leadership has to be visionary as I influence my employees, my subordinates to achieving either my personal vision for the department or the corporate or organizational vision. Leadership is also situational. There's no one right way to lead. And what may work well in one context or one culture or one situation may not always work well in other cultures or contexts or situations. So I would argue that leadership is about exciting people to exceptional performance. It's about learning ways to inspire our team and move them into action. Now, whenever we talk about leadership, we need to also talk about management. There's often this big debate about management and leadership and which is best and which is most important. So again, I would argue as a comparison that management is the achievement of results through the direction of others. Management's really about the coordination and the administration of tasks to achieve a goal. So management will include skill sets such as planning, organizing, staffing, budgeting, controlling, and so on. And we often ask, well, when do I manage? When do I lead? Now, again, in business, we tend to do both at the same time. We manage and lead at the same time. But if I had to point out a very simple way of understanding the difference between the two, I would ask you, have you ever worked for a manager you didn't like? And most people will probably nod in agreement. We've all had that experience of working for someone we didn't really like working for. If I asked a follow-up question, well, why did you work for them then? I'd probably get raised eyebrows because, of course, we have no choice. We have to work for them. And that's really the difference between management and leadership. You work for a manager because you have to, but you follow a leader because you want to. So as managers, if we can create a mindset shift where people start to follow us, not because they have to, but because they want to, because they believe in our way of working, they believe in our vision, they believe in our way of leading our people, well, then we've moved from manager to leader. And that's a great step in improving our emotional intelligence.
What is your take on the relationship between emotional intelligence and leadership?
Yeah, that's a very important question to discuss. There's lots of disagreements actually in the emotional intelligence world about where EI originally came from. But the version which seems to be most true is from Yale University in America, where two professors, two researchers at Yale, a chap called Peter Salve and Jack Mayer, as rumor has it, one weekend were painting one of their houses. They'd got together to help paint one of the houses. And as they were painting this house, they were just talking about psychology. And they asked the question, how is it that you can have managers or leaders who are really qualified, they have all the right qualifications to be a leader, but they can't do it? So they were really discussing qualifications and lack of incompetence, for want of a better word. How can a person be so qualified but unable to do the job? And conversely, how could you have people who were really maybe unqualified to do the job, but naturally were able to do it? And it's from this initial discussion that the entire body of research that we call emotional intelligence was born. So in terms of understanding how can we make leaders better, a key component of that is emotional intelligence. So there's a very, very clear correlation. There's a very clear relationship between the two.
What are the top behaviors that emotionally intelligent leaders show?
Yeah, the most important one is probably that they know themselves. They have a level of self-awareness and they're able to assess themselves realistically. We could argue they have a deep understanding of their strengths, their weaknesses, their needs, their drivers, and they recognize how their feelings affect both themselves and others. Additionally, they're also able to manage feelings and impulses. They can control their bad moods, control their anger. They can choose their words carefully in sensitive situations, maybe avoid hasty judgments. They're able to create an environment of trust and fairness and improve teamwork. They have self-confidence, a firm grasp of their own abilities. They're able to understand social dynamics, and by that, I mean, they understand how the organization works politically. They're able to sense how people are feeling. They can understand various viewpoints, not just their own. Now, that doesn't mean they have to agree with the viewpoint, but they can understand there's a variety of different opinions in the room. They can bring conflict out in the open when they sense it or perceive it. And they're willing to collaborate across all boundaries. So they avoid this silo mentality in teamwork and can work with other teams and people within the organization. I suppose in summary, they tend to be more advanced sociably. They have a knack for finding common ground with all people. They have a network in place they can rely on to help them in times of trouble. They're also committed to helping other people improve. As a manager, as a leader, they're generally friendly, but friendly with purpose. They're not friendly for the sake of just being friendly, but friendly with purpose. They're able to encourage and move their people in a direction they need to get things done. And they're often an excellent persuader, an excellent collaborator.
What does emotional intelligence in leadership look like, and why is it important?
Yeah, it looks like the points I mentioned in the previous question, actually. If a person's able to develop those attributes within themselves, they will certainly improve their emotional intelligence and improve their leadership. And Daniel Goleman put together a very interesting model called the 4-quadrant model, which is very helpful when we look at EI in business or in leadership. And these 4 quadrants can be divided into both intrapersonal and interpersonal skill sets, as I mentioned earlier. So the first 2 quadrants are self-awareness and self-management. Now, self-awareness and self-management are intrapersonal skills, so they are things that I do within myself. And self-awareness, as I mentioned earlier, is seeing myself as I actually am, recognizing my strengths, my weaknesses, and my development areas. Now, when I'm able to do that, and I have a clear understanding of where I need to develop myself, the next quadrant becomes useful, which is self-management. And self-management is where I do something about it. I take responsibility to work on these development areas and to improve them. And the second 2 quadrants are interpersonal skills, which means I use these in the context of others. And the first one is social awareness. And social awareness is recognizing the impact that my communication style has on others and how in turn their communication style impacts me. It's about being able to recognize the politics in the organization, recognize the movers, the shakers, and the general climate that I work in. And finally, the last quadrant is relationship management. And relationship management is generally what happens when I get the first 3 quadrants correct. So when I'm able to work on my self-awareness, my self-management, my social awareness, then as a natural consequence of that, relationship management begins to develop. And relationship management is all about being able to develop others, being an inspirational leader, being able to manage change, being able to influence people, manage conflict, improve teamwork, improve collaboration. So you see, that's exactly why emotional intelligence is important, because these are key leadership skills, they're key management skills. And while they can be developed independently, they also develop naturally through improving my emotional intelligence.
What happens when leaders aren't emotionally intelligent?
Yeah, it's usually a disaster, unfortunately. We'll find that leaders who are lacking in emotional intelligence, well, generally their staff will be a lot more demotivated. You may find that staff turnover is much higher as people resign or leave. You may find there are issues of increased sick leave and increased issues of mental health, decreased issues of staff wellness. So again, it's never really a positive thing. It reminds me of a story I was told by Tom Peters, the management guru, many, many years ago, about a CEO of an organization. And this CEO gets their figures for the quarter, and they are disastrous. So the CEO is absolutely furious. They're punching the wall, they're kicking the desk, they're ranting and raving. And after maybe 5 or 10 minutes, they call their director of sales and marketing into the office and really give this person what for. They shout at them, they verbally abuse them, they blame them for these poor figures. Now, rightly so, the director of sales and marketing is not very happy about being spoken to this way. So when they leave the CEO's office, they call the director of sales in, the director of marketing in, and they give these two people absolutely what for as well. They criticize them, they shout at them, they verbally abuse them as well. Of course, neither of these two managers appreciate being spoken to that way either. And the director of sales leaves the office, calls their sales team together, and again starts shouting at the sales team, telling them what a terrible job they've done and how angry they are and how upset they are by them. Maybe they even threaten them and say, if you don't improve these figures, many of you may get fired in the future. Now, one of the sales team, again, is also very upset about being spoken to this way. And they have a terrible, terrible day. Everything seems to go wrong for them. They get home in the evening, they walk through the door of their house and start shouting at their children. You haven't done your homework, you haven't kept your room tidy, you've been playing PlayStation all day. Go to bed. Yeah, early to bed for you as a punishment. Now the child, again, is very upset. They've been in their room all day doing nothing, and all of a sudden they're in trouble. They're so angry, they kick the cat. Now, of course, the cat doesn't like being kicked, jumps out the window, runs across the road, bang, gets hit by a car. Now, it's a bit of a sad story because the cat dies. So I apologize for any cat lovers. But the question Tom Peters asked was this: who was responsible for killing the cat? Now, you may argue, well, the driver of the car killed the cat. But of course, if the child didn't kick the cat wouldn't run across the road. However, if the parent didn't shout at the child, they wouldn't have kicked the cat. Now, you can trace it all the way back to the CEO. If the CEO handled the situation differently, an entirely different course of events would have unraveled. Now, while the CEO is certainly to blame for their poor behavior, you can't just blame them, because it took just one person in this chain to respond differently, to respond in a more emotionally literate way, and the poor little cat would still be here. There's a famous quote by Aristotle who says that anybody can be angry, that's easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that's not so easy. So many of us are expert at getting angry with people. We all experience getting angry. But to get angry with the right person, at the right time, in the right way, we're not so good at that. So there are no negative emotions. There's only inappropriate contexts. Anger in the appropriate context is okay. However, in the inappropriate context, it obviously has a very, very different result. So what happens when leaders aren't emotionally intelligent? Well, it's usually disaster. So we obviously want to make sure that we can work on the emotional intelligence of our people.
Last but not least, how to start growing leaders' emotional intelligence and leadership flexibility?
Yeah, great question to finish with. Well, there's clearly in psychology a debate between nurture versus nature. How much am I actually born with regard to leadership skill, and how much can I develop? Now, I sit in the school of thought which says that both are true. It's going to be different for different people. Certainly, some people are born with more natural leadership skill than others, but all of us can nurture it. We can develop it. And again, I'll direct you back to the 4-quadrant model that I began with, because that's a really helpful place to look at. So first of all, look at your own self-awareness. Understand your strengths, weaknesses, development areas. Now, a great place to know that is through feedback. Speak to colleagues, speak to friends, speak to your manager. We do that anyway once or twice a year with our appraisals. and listen to what they tell you. Where are they saying that your strengths are, your development areas are? And when you know that, then do something about it. Take personal responsibility and self-directed learning. Look at ways that you can improve your development areas. Be aware of the impact your communication style has on others, and be aware how other people's styles impact you. That's social awareness. And if you get those three right, then in terms of relationship management, everything should generally flow smoothly. So again, that's just some ideas, just some suggestions that you may want to put into practice to improve your own leadership skills and also your own emotional intelligence.
Jonathon, thank you for the great discussion. It was a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. Feel free to leave a comment or a message for us. If there is a topic you would like us to cover, do let us know and we will review it with our content team. Don't forget to watch our recorded episodes on our Vimeo or YouTube channels. Until next time, stay tuned.